everyone. So Exorcist The Believer comes out this October. Now, if you've followed along with this channel, then you know I'm not super pumped about this. I don't think that every franchise needs a requel or continuated story or a remake or whatever. And The Exorcist, like, what are they going to do that's that creative compared to the every year, every couple months, run-of-the-mill possession style film, right? They're all basically the same. They might have slight variations here and there, or, slight deviant stories or whatever, but for the most part, it's the same old tropes, the head spinning, the wall crawl, the spider walk. Like, they kind of rely on like the cheap scares at this point. The original Exorcist laid the foundation for that, and since then we've basically gotten all copycats, which is fine, but it just kind of feels like this isn't going to try to break the mold again. It's just going to kind of be another thing that ties into the past. And my biggest fear is that it's just titled The Exorcist just for the audience and attraction, rather than it being a successful, like, okay, well, this makes sense, right? Like, this is something that is great and really ties in and really adds to the franchise, rather than something that I just think is like, okay, this is terrible. And the other thing that doesn't really give me a lot of hope and promise is it's the same people that just did the Halloween trilogy, and Halloween Ends, for the most part, has been unanimously like, this is awful, right? And Halloween Kills was 50-50. Like, most people love it, other people hate it. I'm not a big fan of it. But overall, the trilogy as a whole, I thought was very underwhelming. I felt like didn't really add much to the past. And just kind of was like, okay, it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill Halloween. At least, 2018 was. But nonetheless, that became a trilogy. Now we got this. And the problem is they are about ready to do another round of test screenings, because the previous test screenings were bad. And so they very likely made some changes and are now scheduled to do another round of test screenings, 3 months, 2 months, something like that, before the movie releases? Like, that's usually not a good sign. But nonetheless, according to Viewer Anon, The Exorcist Believer is testing again tonight in New Jersey. Again, he posted this yesterday, 2 days ago now, at the time of which you were watching this. But they did another test screening tonight in New Jersey. If there's an afterlife, there's a real opportunity for William Friedkin to have some fun. Again, just, giving us a little update on the testing. The last round of testings in New York were terrible. There were a lot of complaints about just the pacing, the length of film, right? Like, so here's something that I've talked about in the past. And I've had some pushback from people about the original. But again, you got to put it in perspective of the time and today's time. We are in an era of fast-paced, boom, 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 right? I think of most of the movies that have major success today. A lot of them are just like non-stop, right? Or they're just like crazy, like far-fetched, like, whoa, or there's something like, Spider-Man Into the Universe, something like that, right? Like, think of all the Marvel films, the, Fast and Furious films, right? Like, all of these big box office films are usually fast-paced, a lot of action, there's a lot of, like, there's not a lot of downtime, it's boom, 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 boom. The original Exorcist had, 2.5 hours of just build-up and story and things like that was great for that time, and you could get away with it more during that time. But in today's time, in this era of TikTok and shorts and really quick hits of content and entertainment, right? The attention span isn't what it once was, right? And that's why you see a lot of these movies, like even the longer movies, like they usually have more negative reviews, and this upcoming Exorcist is supposed to be like 2.5 hours. I personally don't mind the build-up, right? Because very likely this is going to be the establishment film. This is going to get us introduced to the characters. It's going to get introduced to the main story, because this is supposed to be the beginning of a trilogy. That was announced when they announced this Exorcist thing, that they were going to do a trilogy. So very likely this is going to be the established building block that is going to lead into the chaos that is the in-between film. Just like, again, same way Halloween trilogy went. You had the build-up film, the introduction of the characters. You know, you had a couple hits here and there of Michael, but for the most part, it wasn't really super heavy into just Michael running around killing people, right? Halloween Kills, that's what it was all about, right? Just Michael's greatest hits, just running through the town. And then Halloween Ends was supposed to be the conclusion, kind of got back to a little slower pace, kind of became more about like the story that they were trying to build, even though the story, at least to me, didn't make any sense. But nonetheless, that was kind of the idea. I believe this Exorcist trilogy will follow that same blueprint. Get the introductory film, you'll get here's all the chaos, here's all the craziness, boom, 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 and then you'll get kind of the conclusion film that kind of is like maybe the aftermath or, you know, whatever, right? That's how I think this will go. And the original Exorcist, it was in a time where people were willing to sit through, you know, a 2 hour, what was it, 2 hour and 12 minutes, I think is what the original one was. But yeah, so they were more willing to sit through a film that were willing to build an established character. Like, how many films really take the time to grow and establish characters the ways of the past, right? Like, even Scream, right? Talk about Scream a lot on this. Like, when, like, Scream 5 didn't do a great job of establishing. I mean, people hated Sam. Like, the consensus was Sam is terrible because they didn't really take the time to build the character. Like, we didn't really have a real grasp of her. They did a much better job in Scream 6, and people have came around since then. But, like, you look at, like, Scream 96, like, that was about as close to a perfect film as far as, like, giving you the suspense, giving you the build-up, and building the characters, right? Very few films today take the time to build the characters. Like, here's the story, or you get, like, that quick introduction, like, hi, I'm Tim, and I'm blah, 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 and this is Stacy, and this is this, and they just kind of give you a quick run through, and you never really get the time to really build the characters, right? Like, the original Exorcist was also about, like, the impact on the mother and the family and her career and her mental state, and, like, it wasn't just about the possession, right? It was about this overall story and the impact that it had on the mother and the conflicts and just her struggles, right? Where you see a lot of these exorcism style films, and it's, here's the character, now they're possessed, here's the priest, now the priest is going to try to unpossess them, and now you have like this 30-minute battle of just the priest is gonna lose. Oh no, the priest was able to exorcise the demon because of, you know, love or whatever, right? Like, it's basically how it goes. Where, you know, like, even the original Exorcist, like, that wasn't the case. It took the priest dying, you know, throwing himself out the window, falling down. Like, that was a movie of tragedy rather than a movie of, like, happy endings and rainbows and butterflies, right? Like, it just, but it was also a different time, right? And they're going to try to modernize this. And my guess is this was like a 2.5 hour film that was either, or I think it's one of two options. Either A, it was a 2.5 hour film of just like trying to establish the characters, but it was extremely slow paced, because that was the complaints, right? That it was just too long for something that like just didn't have the payoff, right? And that's why I think that this is going to be the establishment film. So my guess is this was like 2.5 hours, and like an hour and 40 minutes of this is just the girls running around happy-go-lucky, the father, the school, like, oh, here they go in the woods, it's a little strange, okay, but nothing's really happening. They're just acting weird, they're just acting strange. Here's a couple scientific tests. You know, it's called The Believer because the father doesn't believe in possession or believe in the devil or God or anything like that. And in the end, he becomes a believer, right? Like, that's probably how this is going to go. The other alternative is that it just was, you know, it didn't really tell a convincing story, and it was 2.5 hours. which is bad if that's the case. So my guess is this test screening, either A, they added more just craziness, or they cut some parts out to kind of get to the point quicker. That's my guess. I mean, I don't know for sure. Again, I wasn't part of the test screening, but if I had to guess, that's probably how that went. Hopefully this round of test screenings will have more of a positive review. But again, I'm not super sold on this Exorcist trilogy. I think it's going to be your run of the mill. Like if the Halloween trilogy was great, right? Like if that Halloween trilogy was just like, man, like, dude, that was fire. Like that was one of the best 3 films in the franchise, right? Maybe I'd have a little more faith. But it's like the last trilogy you just did for an iconic franchise, you essentially botched and was a disaster. And your final film, the consensus was that was one of the worst movies in the franchise, if not the worst in the franchise. So I don't have a lot of faith in them to execute the Exorcist of all things in a proper way. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Agree with me? Do you agree with my concerns? Do you not? Somewhere in between? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I would love to hear it, so let me know down in the comments below.